What happens when debt isn't paid? And just jumping right into it, I try to define what debt is. And I say debt is defined as the amount of money owed to someone or something. Debt is typically happens when someone receives a loan. And I think all my college listeners can appreciate, this concept, and just say, yeah, I understand this concept of debt personally.
Sally Mae has not been a good friend. I mean, I'm grateful for them helping me out go to seminary, but when it comes to my paycheck, like I just got paid on Thursday, and it was like, all right, bank, I got some money, feel good. Sally Mae is like, or now it's Navient, I think, but they're like, yo, so glad you got paid. Give us $500. We're like, all right, so this is exciting in life. Bills.
And it's like when I was doing my research on this, just realizing this concept of debt isn't something new.
Not at all.
This concept of debt has been around when I was doing my research, just even back in Mesopotamia, where just this idea of loaning someone some whatever resource that it may be, and then adding interest to it.
Correct.
Just seeing how far that goes back and realizing that it's actually kind of a benefit for this.
Yeah.
I talk about it in the book that banks give out loans to small businesses for people to go to college. It's kind of like an investment.
Correct.
So right off the bat, I kind of answer, kind of address why do people go in debt, because the risk or the reward outweighs the risk.
Correct.
And looking at it from that perspective of like we both just said, going to college, the reward of getting an education is worth that risk. Correct. Of going into debt. Hasn't paid off yet.
Yeah, never. It feels like a lifetime before Sally Mae is like, we're good.
But hopefully it will eventually pay off. But one of the things that I wanted to discuss with this idea of debt that we really don't think about is this concept of just the lender and the borrower.
Correct.
Like, I would much rather be in the position of the one who's lending.
Correct.
Than asking for, to go into debt.
Of course, everyone wants to be the lender because you got money, you have options and everything. But in reality, no matter which position you are, either the lender or the borrower, you're in risk no matter what.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things in the world is sports. So if everyone who knows me, I'm a Miami fan through and through. And so when we see sports and we have a moment that we're going to sign this contract, or we're going to draft this player, that's a risk from a lender to all right, this guy's like, I need you to invest in me. I need to borrow some of your money so I can produce. And the lender is like, yeah, I'm going to take some risk out and see what you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just that idea of being the lender, like I said, either way you look at it, there's some risk on both ends. But I think most people would prefer to be the lender.
Yeah.
And so I try to just think through this logically. It's like, how does one become the lender? Because it means that I have to have some sort of resource, whether it's capital, whether it's land, whatever it is, I've got to have it. Whatever you need, I've got to have. But how do I become the lender? And I kind of just go back just to the origins of, how does one obtain resources? And so I kind of go throughout just human history and just saying, historically the answer is one obtains resources by any means necessary. And so I go through just these nations that have essentially conquered, because that's essentially what land, I think, is probably the biggest resource that there is. Now, how does someone obtain the land,
Yeah, by war, fights, and breaking it down. I mean, yeah, that's what lenders, or what if you want to say lenders, but conquerors do.
Yeah.
They conquer.
Yeah, and so because they conquer, they plunder, they have these resources that they can give. And so I kind of break down, the empires throughout history. I talk about the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, and one of the biggest empires that we fail to realize is the British Empire.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about it like that. And just a practical example is the second largest spoken language is English.
Correct.
And it's like, man, just how big of an influence the British Empire was, and how much they conquered and everything like that.
Sometimes people think of Alexander the Great, who is someone who I admire, especially for their military. This dude conquered the Mesopotamian known world. I remember one of the battles, we were talking about conquering, was he met his general and he met his like opponent right on a playing field on top of a mountaintop or a cliff. And before there was bloodshed of the opponent losing people, Alexander went to the guy and was like, "Listen, my people are so loyal to me that they will die for me." And the general was like, "Nah, don't sweat it." He's like, "You want to see this?" And he like snaps his fingers, and eventually, known troops of his army just start walking off the cliff like it's nothing to their death because they were so loyal to this dude. And by that, the general of the opposing army was like, "I surrender." He's like, your boys are willing just to jump off a cliff for you. We
I want to see them.
yeah. And so that empire just grew. But then you take a step back and look at the world scheme of just the British Empire. Bruh, like they almost had a third of the world under their belt.
It's crazy to think about.
It's crazy. And even till this day, like when I'm reading Mary Thatcher, I'm looking at Queen Elizabeth or kings of the empire, I mean, like their struggle to maintain this massive conquered empire is beautiful to see. And even today, it's still widely known. And like you'll see flags like Jamaica, for example, will have their own beautiful flag, 3 colors. And right next to it, we got the British Empire flag. Even though I don't think they're still under the law or the rule, but there's still respect. Like, yo, we beautiful people, we free now, but at the same time, we understand where we came from.
Yeah. And so I go through these empires just saying, how does one obtain resources so that they can be the lender, so that they can lend money for someone to go into their debt. So hopefully you guys are following the logical progression, because I kind of like bring it home to here in America. And I'm not a American history buff, but I think I know enough to know that there were people already here.
Yeah.
You know, the Native, and I don't even know if they want to call themselves Native Americans, but there was a group of people who were already here. Now, I don't know if they conquered it from someone else or how that goes, and not that I want to throw America under the bus, because all of the world history has operated this way. Doesn't necessarily make it right, but that's just all of just human history. Just conquer, take, and then continue conquering. And so when we get here to America and we just see, you know, the genocide that has happened, and then just what America is just built on, just essentially conquering is a fancy way of stealing. Is essentially what it is. You know, we come, we wipe out everyone, take what was already here and claim it to ourselves. And America is kind of built on that idea of conquering. And so I kind of just make this point just to get someone to think. It's like before 1776, America didn't even have its independence. Who's to say 500 years from now, America will not be conquered by another nation? Yeah. Because America's not that old. Correct. We kind of think that America's like always been here. Mm-hmm. No, it hasn't. You know, just maybe 300 years, America's been here.
I remember when I travel across the world, and I would travel to either Rome or Paris and London, and they're like, "Oh, you're Americans," and we'll have dialogue. And people are like, you guys are such a young country. You really don't know what you're doing at times. I'm like, bruh, check yourself. Like, we're one of the most powerful countries in the world. We have the most advanced technology, X, Y, and Z in politics too, but we're still a young country in the grand scheme of things. And so it's interesting to see and study the world history and the states or United States history too, and think like we're so big and bad because we conquered so much. Reality, we're just 50 states and a couple colonies. Yep, that's us right now.
Yeah, it's a very...
And there's nothing wrong. Don't get it twisted. I'm grateful for being in America. Yeah. My family from Cuba, my family from Ireland, or actually, like we were talking a little bit about the Native American part. So if you can see me, it's great. I'm 6'3", I think, right? And like about a lot of weight. I'm very fluffy. But as a Cuban, the average Cuban's like 5'2". And so, like, when I have family photographs, I sit down so my Cuban abuela and Mimi and Carlos can stand next to me and look tall. And so the reality is that, like, my mother's side, I have Choctaw in me. So I'm also Native American. Okay. And so when I went to Oklahoma to visit my family, they tell you stories of, like, yeah, those Americans came over, or people from the boat came over, basically, and just conquered our land. Yeah. And so, yeah. I mean, you can see the concept. It's always from the perspective also. Yeah, absolutely. Like, from one perspective, like, we won this war. Mm-hmm. Another perspective, you stole this land from us, those who lose. So the lender and borrow concept is kind of the same thing to some extent.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so I want to look at it, like you said, in its totality and not necessarily find fault, because everyone has done it. Not that, that makes it right, but we'll get to that point, because it's a sobering thought, because there's a country out there that could potentially conquer us.
There's a lot of countries, not just one.
And so we just kind of look in our lifetime, we're like, yeah, that won't happen. But like I said, 500 years from now, Lord willing, if America is still existing, who's to say some other country won't come and do the same thing that, the Europeans did to the Native Americans?
And that's a whole different discussion for another time.
So it's a very sobering thought. And I say, looking, and this is what I wanted to make a point about. So we talked about the lender and wanting to be the lender, how to obtain these resources. But I wanted to make this point earlier. It's essentially this concept of ownership.
Correct.
How do I obtain these resources, become the owner, so that I can lend out to someone else? And so just looking at it from a historical perspective, one becomes the owner through conquering.
Correct.
And so this is America now, because America conquered the land, and now America owns the land, in quotation. They own it. But I say, looking at, ownership from a historical perspective is truly dark and depressing, but it fits perfectly into an evolutionary worldview, which kind of advocates survival of the fittest.